Hey everybody, welcome back to Ravenstead. We're going to build another piece of Wargame terrain. I've got some cutouts here. I'm thinking maybe some kind of a ruined aqueduct. Aqueduct? Aqueduct. Aqueduct? Aqueduct. Agua. Aqua. Aqueduct? Hang on. An aqueduct. Structure used to conduct water over a valley or hollow made of stone or wood, which differs from a sluice, flume, leat, penstock, or lade, waterway for transporting material or providing a flow of water to power a mill. So this, my friends, is going to be an aqueduct. So throughout this build, I kind of changed my mind a few times, partly out of the necessity of me making mistakes. Here's a fine example. I am cladding the inside of this arch with what turned out to look more like the inside of a subway or a highway tunnel. So after painstakingly placing all these little tiny bricks, I ended up cutting them off and then remembered kind of how to build a stone arch. So I needed some angled stone pieces to go in to make that locking arch. When we get a little further into this build, I realized that I don't have room for the keystone at the top of the arch. That's what kind of locks the whole arch in together at the top. So I make some pretty drastic changes to this build from my initial concept. Did a lot of trimming, a lot of cutting, and you can see the piece underneath, the form that I put the bricks on, that shape is going to be unrecognizable here in a little bit. But, you know, we live, we learn. I really wanted to give up on this particular build, but I've found that it's best just to keep pushing on and hoping for something better to come out of it. And in this case, I think it did. There are a few things about the build that don't make engineering sense, but that's okay. It's in a fantasy world, and we use the physics-defying properties of hot glue. There we go. Two beautiful arches that, when put together, didn't give me a plausible gap that I wanted. In hindsight, I wish I had built the arch all in one piece and then kind of built a gap into it later. Here I'm just carving away, trying to make sense of the build that I have at hand. Just gonna chip and carve away at the foam, see if I can get the two pieces to match up. I eventually do change the base of this piece as well. That base ended up not working out the way I wanted it to, nor did the two end columns. Everything just kept getting bigger and bigger, and just wasn't making visual sense for the aqueduct that I had in my mind. And I'm going to attempt not to say aqueduct about 20 times in this video. So there we go. That's what I ended up with. The arch is too wide, even with that ruined gap, so zip zip, rebuild. I cut it down with a hot wire and then rebuilt the tops. So now I can position these two pillars apart on a different base, and we can assume that there's some damage to the understructure. I'm just going to line those out so I have references to where the tower is going to go. And I use a craft knife quite a bit through this project. Don't worry, I don't cut myself, so just relax and enjoy it. Just going to get a good organic shape. I kind of saw this as like a small stone plateau, a rocky area with some moss and grass growing around it. Once we get to the part of the build where I'm adding in the flocking and grass and bushes and whatnot, it'll become a little bit more organic. It's a lot of fun to watch at a higher speed. It was kind of tedious, but it's always interesting to see where these things come out. Here I'm kind of thinking about areas that I can put a miniature to make sure there are playable areas on the terrain. And then rolling in some texture with a little bit of aluminum foil. And wire brushing the edge of the stonework. Give it some nice striations. And we'll just hot glue down these two pillars. Cool little swirly Celtic symbol there. Weird. And put in the second one. So most of the time I use hot glue. You do end up with those annoying little strings, so you see me twirling the hot glue gun. That's me trying to break those strings. Now I'm just texturing some material I'm going to use for timbers. And taking them to the mill and get them cut to length. This is all going to be the superstructure of the aqueduct. So some vertical supports, and then cross timbers, and then some cross bracing will go in. This is honestly becoming one of my more favorite parts, doing the woodworking. I even get a little carried away in this build, start actually cutting like mortise and tenon joints and lap joints. Stuff you're probably not going to see, but it's fun, so I do it. I just pop these in. Nice. Now, I'm cutting a lap joint here. This is not structural. None of this is structural because it's held together with hot glue, which, like I said, defies physics. But I think it looks cool. So the waterway of this aqueduct is going to be planked in wood. A lot like you would plank a boat. So the seams, I envision the seams being very tight, maybe even packed with cotton or wool or hemp to waterproof it. There's a great big gap on the side. I bet that leaked all the time. And then the timbers going in to make up the sides of the waterway. Oh yeah. I ended up going one more plank higher than that. Now I gotta have a ladder. Gotta have a way for our miniatures to get up and down. I was gonna make this out of some sticks, but I decided just to stay true to the foam build. Now we're gonna black bomb this thing with a mixture of Mod Podge and black latex paint. That just kind of seals everything in. It also helps all the loose parts stick together. A little bit of pewter gray. That's for the stonework. Then we'll paint up the wood. And then some graphite gray for the base. I like the difference in color between the stonework of the structure. Like the stone came from somewhere else. Do a little dry brushing here, a little high contrast. This will all kind of blend in with one of the last stages, putting the black wash on. I'm using color parchment on top of that pewter gray, and then I'll use beige color to dry brush the wood. The two colors are pretty similar, so I'm not really too worried about getting paint from one surface to another. There's that really high contrast. The whole thing, when I'm done dry brushing, has kind of a snowy or frosty look to it, but you have to trust the process. Putting that black wash on there is really important. It just kind of dulls everything down a little bit, kind of pulls all the colors together. There we go, see, kind of frosty looking. Hot glued the ladder in, and now we're getting on with the black wash. It's just a mixture of black acrylic ink and water and a little bit of jet dry. I got that recipe from Jeremy at Black Magic Craft. Clever guy. I think all of us in this hobby now are pretty much just borrowing from one another. If you see something that I've done that nobody else has, steal it, make it yours. I'd like to think I'm that clever. The green wash I use, I make it super bright, but really, really thin. There's very little pigment in it. So by the time it dries, it's just a wisp of color. but it just gives that nice little green moldy color. And this was an aqueduct. I think we're up to 10 aqueducts per the video. Sorry about that. So a lot of water went through this at one point. Now just putting a little bit of gray paint and then dusting it with some flocking to make some grassy areas and some moss areas. Once I get this lighter flocking on, then I've got some heavier flocking I'm going to put on there for bushes. And also want to plant a little bunch of flowers here. A little splash of color. Everything can't be grim and dark, I guess. At least not in my little world. There we go, some bigger bushes going in. Nice. Yep. Stuff grows everywhere. I probably should use PVA glue for this kind of thing, but I like to get it done quickly. Alright, let's have a look. I'm going to put it on the turntable and we'll spin this thing and get a good look at it. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. It's a super fun build. A little frustrating to start out with. Struggled a little bit with the English language. We figured it out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you on the next video. Aqueduct. So I'm going to have a little arch